Good afternoon. My name is Mahlatse Gallens, the politics editor for News 24. We are, of course, live from Parliament at the current moment that secret voting is currently underway. We know that earlier on debates were on for those who are supporting the motion and those against the motion. So as we speak right now, voting has actually begun. And to get a little bit of insight in what happened today and what we should expect, we're joined by our resident analyst, Melanie Verwoerd. Melanie, good afternoon and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Mahlatse. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the voting. It has been high drama with issues around what should happen with the ballot and how actually the voting should actually go ahead.
Yeah, look, it's been a day of high drama. You know, very, most probably the best of political drama that you can get. Of course, started yesterday with the Speaker Bale Kambete surprising most people, or most of us, with this whole idea of a secret ballot. And then today it's just been picking up speed. And of course, even today there was some drama because we heard that just before the National Assembly was about to start, the opposition members or members of the opposition discovered that the ballot papers were numbered. And since MPs are called alphabetically, that would have meant that the vote wasn't actually secret. So at the last minute, after the opposition members objected, they had to reprint the ballot papers and have done so in time now. So they're now voting as we speak.
And of course, this is quite a historic moment for us as a country. We have never seen members of parliament vote in a secret ballot in a motion of no confidence. And a lot of the speakers speaking to this point. I mean, Bantu Holomisa saying that he's created the safety net for ANC MPs especially.
That's right. We've never had that. The only time that members of parliament votes in secret is for the election of the president and that of the speaker. And that, of course, has happened quite a couple of times. But in fact, for a motion of no confidence or anything else, it's never happened. So it is completely unprecedented. And of course, that's where there's such a big fuss. History will tell us whether this was a good idea. I mean, it's clearly for today we think it's a good idea, but it's a question of whether in future the precedent that it's going to create, for example, at local government level, and also if in future we ever have a position where there is a minority coalition government that rules the country, you could of course then have every 6 months the government falling if you still have a secret ballot for every vote of no confidence. So history, we will have to wait for history to declare whether this was a good or a bad thing today.
Because it's precedent setting, because part of being public representatives is that us, the people who voted for them, should know what decisions they are taking inside the chambers.
It is, you know, and I think certainly it is in principle not a good idea to make votes secret. But we know also, as the Constitutional Court has said, that it is important that members of parliament must be able to vote without the fear of intimidation, the fear of being persecuted, etc. Now, despite legal opinions which said that if the ANC, for example, or any political party does anything disciplinary-wise or performs any form of sanction against members of parliament because they voted against a party line, that most probably will not be able to be upheld in court, that it will fail in court if members take that on review. But you know, it's not only about that. It is, of course, the fact that somebody like Makosi Khoza has been threatened, that she has to move between safe houses now, that her children has been threatened. And of course, that means that members get worried, you know, and that they therefore are scared about which way to go when it is like voting against your party leader.
Of course, the big question is how will that vote go? Today, this morning, we had the ANC caucus meeting, and we do understand that Secretary General Gwede Mantashe basically laid down the law. He told the MPs that you cannot vote in support of this motion because it could spell disaster for the party. I mean, is that a fair assessment of how things could go if this motion were to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's disaster for the party necessarily if it were to succeed. I think that's something that they use to threaten or to scare ANC MPs. Also the fact that they have said that perhaps there could be an election, an early election. Of course, the ANC doesn't want an early election now because they are losing support at the moment. So, I mean, obviously all of that would be arguments to kind of intimidate or motivate MPs to not vote with the opposition. My view is that in whatever the logic behind it is or not, I do not believe that we are going to see the motion succeed today. If you watch the ANC MPs, how they entered the chamber, they came in dancing as one big group. When the speaker first put the question just orally, as she has to do, when she said, look, all of those in favor, vote say aye. So, of course, the whole opposition shouted aye. Those who are against it says nay. And that, of course, the ANC took a minute and then realized it was them because they don't always vote against something. But then if you actually watch who didn't actually respond in the ANC benches, it was really a handful of MPs.
It was a handful of MPs, but others are saying it's overstaged to show this unity. Even when they were coming out of caucus, you know, all of them were trying to say we were united, we were ululating, we were singing. Do you think that those that have openly called for President Jacob Zuma to go would actually bite the bullet and vote for him to go, even if they don't get that threshold?
I think you might get a few. But I think, ANC people were saying to me, maybe if we're very optimistic, 19 or 20, that would be high in my estimate. But I think what we might see is some abstentions. It all largely depends also which way the members of parliament, the ANC members of parliament who are also members of the SACP, which way they're going, because they have always felt a little bit more free to express themselves. But of course we have to remember that they are ultimately ANC MPs. They are here on an ANC ticket, not on an SACP ticket, and that's that they are bound by the ANC party line. But it's going to depend on which way they go.
But isn't abstention cowardice?
Look, I don't know if it's cowardice. Of course, what it does do is that it is in effect a vote against the motion, because you need 201 votes to pass the motion. It still sends a message, of course, which says we are not comfortable with this whole thing. What it does do is help those members who fundamentally don't want to support Jacob Zuma but have concerns about voting with the opposition, and there are many of them. So in a way it gives them a way of expressing their dissatisfaction without actually supporting the opposition.
Let's talk about the speeches. I don't know if you would agree, but what stood out for me in particular was that the Chief Whip, Jackson Mthembu, did not lead the charge for the defense of this motion. It was left to the deputy. The people that were defending, Pule Mabe, Nathi Mthethwa, and Doris Dakude, expected Zuma supporters. The one big surprise, of course, Nosiviwe Mapisa Nqakula, just a week after her husband has actually called for President Jacob Zuma to step down. But very little mention of Zuma the man, but a lot of defense of the organization, the party, even from Jacob Zuma supporters.
You know, it was clear from this morning when they made the list available to us that we knew that they have lined up a very strong pro-Zuma crowd. I guess unsurprising. You don't want a Derek Hanekom suddenly up there, or Pravin Gordhan. So I suppose not surprising, but definitely not the heavy hitters in the ANC at all, quite surprisingly so. And I'm not quite sure how they decided on those names. And you're right, there were a few surprises, definitely Jackson Mthembu. That he didn't speak. That was very interesting. There were a few other interesting things. For example, also like that Ballet Kambete wasn't in the chair until right towards the end, and immediately could feel the atmosphere in the chamber. The moment she came in, first it was a bit humorous when she was applauded by the EFF. It gave her a standing applause for coming in, but then immediately you could feel that the chamber again, the tension rose, they deteriorated, because up to that point, Letshiza Tsinoli, who's the deputy speaker, handled it with fairly, like he tends to, with gusto, but also with a good sense of humor and so on. I think the speeches, especially from the ANC overall, were very weak, really kind of lackluster. The opposition, equally so, wasn't that strong for me. Of course, always good to listen to Julius Malema. He entertains, he's good. Maimani was very strong in his appeal to ANC member. And then, of course, there's always a silence when, almost a reverence when Gatsha Buthelezi speaks. And he was quite outspoken as well. Of course, there's some of the parties which we're not sure, of course, which way they're going to go, some of the very small opposition parties. And they not all of them said. We know the PAC will not vote for the motion. They're going to vote against. And there were a few others which we're still not 100% clear about.
Does the opposition risk anything by losing this motion? This is the 8th motion against President Jacob Zuma. As you said, a lot of the things that they're saying, very repetitive. We've heard them in the past. What is the cost for them if they lose this?
Well, I think the cost now, especially with the secret ballot, is quite big because, first of all, Jacob Zuma is walking out of here, if this motion is defeated today, stronger than ever before, because he has said, brought it on, bring it on, bring it on. And now nobody can say again, you know, even in the ANC, but also from the opposition, you know, it's very hard to see how they can bring another vote of no confidence in a few months' time, certainly before December. So I think in that sense, yes. And the other problem the opposition consistently has is if they actually keep on, every time they bring a vote of no confidence to the table, it means the ANC consolidates. You know, the ANC sort of fragments, there's a lot of opposition in the ANC, a lot of different camps, but then the opposition puts a vote of no confidence and suddenly the enemy becomes clearer, they become focused on the enemy and they consolidate. And I think that is a problem every single time the opposition does that.
Actually, one of President Jacob Zuma's supporters was telling us that what we don't realize is that in a time of crisis, especially when an attack is coming from outside, that's when they actually do close ranks. But where does that put those that have called for him to openly, that have come out publicly to say he must step down if this motion succeeds? Oh, does not succeed.
If it doesn't succeed, I mean, look, if the motion succeeds, I think there'll be a lot of questions about who did what. And of course, people know if it succeeds, they know roughly who are the ones that supported Zuma. But it's highly unlikely that this motion will succeed today, very highly unlikely. If it doesn't succeed, look, I mean, it's hard for the ANC. They can't really take disciplinary action against any of them. We've heard now that we heard the Constitutional Court expressing themselves. I've read several legal opinions on this matter. And I think if the ANC actually decides to take disciplinary action against any of them, that it will be a long, difficult road of supported, you know, of repeated legal challenges and so on. So my guess is the ANC will let it be. But of course, they all know that their positions on the list next time round is most probably very far from being guaranteed. But there's so much that's going to happen between December and between now and December, and then after that between December and 2019.
2019 is always what we talk about, but will the voters remember that the ANC has repeatedly defended President Jacob Zuma? Loyal ANC supporters, will they remember come 2019, or will they have time to actually recover from all of this?
Look, I think what's really going to determine outcome in 2019 is what happens at the December conference, if it takes place and it's not postponed, and what happens then thereafter. So, for example, if the Zuma camp wins outright, if President Zuma decides, for example, to stay on as president and doesn't resign off the country, if he keeps some form of position in the ANC executive, all of those scenarios, I think, will be very damaging to the ANC. And I think people will remember that, and I think the ANC will be punished for that. Of course, if for example, a Cyril Ramaphosa victory is there and that camps win outright, I think it's a very different scenario that happens then. I think then the ANC support will most probably go up. I think the DA will suffer a little bit, because I think a lot of, and I think a lot of, but also a lot of people who went to the DA will go back to the ANC. And you know, then we're talking a totally different scenario. And then there's also a question that if the Zuma camp wins outright, will there be a new party? Will Cyril Ramaphosa lead it? Will the SACP go out on their own? There are very, very many scenarios that can play itself out after December, and we'll have to see how that pans out.
Thank you very much. That was our resident analyst, Melanie Verwoerd, giving us some insight on what she sees happening today, basically saying to us that she does not believe that this 8th motion against President Jacob Zuma will actually succeed. At the moment, voting is continuing inside the chambers. It's a historic one. For the first time, MPs in a motion of no confidence voting via the secret ballot. It was clarified by the Speaker, Baleka Mbete, that the threshold remains 201 for the motion to actually succeed, despite the fact that the ANC has lost some of its MPs and the numbers are not fully 400. The threshold remains 201. We are expecting that after the voting has been completed, then the chief whips of the different parties will be there to monitor the counting as it gets underway. So a little while yet to hear what the outcome of this ballot will be. My name is Mahlatse Gallens.